Upon completion of the greatest show on earth in 1951, producer-director Cecil B. DeMille decided that his next film would be the largest, grandest motion picture ever made, The Ten Commandments. Although DeMille had originally made a version of the film in 1923, it would pale in comparison to the extravaganza that he had planned for the remake. With over 1,200 storyboards drawn during pre-production, the completed shooting script came in at an unheard of 308 pages and contained over 70 speaking roles. The Ten Commandments was 5 years in the making and took DeMille, his company of actors and technicians, not only to Egypt and back to Hollywood, but also led them into motion picture history. It has been over 50 years since production began on the Ten Commandments, and since its completion, the film has remained as timeless and relevant as the biblical story itself. Of the thousands who participated in the making of this motion picture, only a few still remain who witnessed the magic of working for Cecil B. DeMille. Here, they share some of their memories of the Ten Commandments. Charlton Heston had already made a name for himself in Hollywood as a leading man, having appeared in numerous films during the 1950s. He had also worked for DeMille before, heading an all-star cast in The Greatest Show on Earth in 1952. But playing the part of Moses would be the role of a lifetime.
I've played kings and cardinals and presidents and tyrants. They're wonderful parts, and certainly Moses was one of the greatest.
There was never any question after he made The Greatest Show on Earth that Heston would play Moses.
To get the role, which was obviously the role of the year in Ten Commandments, stemmed partly from that. Also, in part because when he had been in Italy, he stopped in the museum in Rome where they have this Michelangelo statue of Moses. And it also looks a lot like me. Someone pointed that out to him. The statue looks a lot like Chuck Heston. And he couldn't get it out of his mind. Thank God.
Once DeMille had his Moses in his mind, he felt confident to go ahead with the picture.
I was aware of the fact that it was a make-or-break opportunity for me. No question. If I'd screwed up with that film, I would have been in an awkward situation, I think. If you can't make a career out of two DeMille pictures, you're in the wrong business.
Charlton Heston was one of the brightest men I have ever met, and one of the kindest. He was very serious about his acting. He read tombs on Moses.
That's what you're supposed to do. If you're playing an historical figure, which I've done, I suspect, more than any actor in town, you spend a lot of time on the history of Egypt. There are any number of books, and you've got to read all you can find.
Our trip to Mount Sinai was more than a motion picture making expedition. It was the climax of a great spiritual experience.
We shot up there on top of Mount Sinai for 2 days and nights. The oldest Christian church in the world is the monastery of St. Catherine's, which is at the foot of Mount Sinai. And DeMille and I spent one night there. The abbot of the monastery had us to dinner. He and DeMille were talking. And I said, you know, Mr. DeMille, seems to me that if you hear the voice of God, you hear it inside yourself. I'd like very much to do the voice of God in the burning bush. And he said, well, Chuck, you've got a pretty good part as it is. But the abbot, fortunately, was intrigued by that. He said, I think that's an interesting idea. So Mr. DeMille said, well, we'll see about that. But as it came to pass, I did get to do the voice of the burning bush.
Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon
just before we were to leave to go to Egypt, Mr. DeMille said, Mrs. Heston, I understand you're not going to be able to join us in Egypt after all. And she said, no, my doctor feels I have to watch for my child. He said, when do you expect your child to be born? And she said, in February. And he ran some couple of numbers in his head, and he said, if it's a boy, he would be 3 months old when we're scheduled to shoot the scene of the infant Moses in the Nile. If it's a boy, he can play the part. He must have had someone planted in the hospital, because the first communication we had, I had barely picked up my newborn son when a telegram came saying, congratulations, he's got the part, C.B. DeMille.
For this you shall drink bitter waters.
A lot of makeups, I'll tell you that. And as the older Moses gets, the older I have to get. I had actually learned already, which is a handy skill. If you have a complicated character makeup, you haven't stretched the chair back, and I learned to go to sleep in those. It's kind of interesting. You go back and you doze, and you kind of half-waken and go off again. And then finally, they throw the seat forward, and you look in the mirror, and there's somebody else there.
If there is one more plague on Egypt, it's by your word that God will bring it.
Certainly, Moses is one of the great figures in history, and it was a challenge to play it. I like to think I had some success in it, and it was very exciting to work on. Wonderful part. This is a man that had a hand in creating a new nation, freeing a people, with a little help from God.
The Ten Commandments featured an extraordinary supporting cast, which included Ann Baxter, John Carradine, Edward G. Robinson, Deborah Paget, Martha Scott, Vincent Price, and John Derrick. For the part of Ramses, the Egyptian pharaoh, DeMille knew that only one actor would fit the role perfectly.
I know you, my sweet. You're a sharp-clawed, treacherous little peacock. But you're food for the gods. And I'm going to have all of you.
Ewell lit up a room. He and Grandfather were great friends. Somebody suggested him for the pharaoh, and Grandfather said, pack your bags, we're going to New York. We went the next day and saw Ewell Brenner in The King and I. Grandfather saw the first act, went backstage with me. We saw Ewell breathing oxygen. It was a very hard role. And DeMille said, how would you like to play the most powerful man in the world?
Ewell was marvelous in it. I think it's really the best performance in the film. He was born for that part. And I enjoyed playing opposite him enormously.
Come to me no more, Moses. For on the day you see my face again, you will surely die.
Very good stuff.
I got to work with Ewell Brenner, and he was always so nice to me. He was very, very pleasant, but he was never very outgoing. He was all business. He was very focused. There wasn't a lot of time for joking around with him.
I remember Ewell was still doing King and I on Broadway, and so he came over for only one day of shooting in Egypt, because he had to get back to the play.
But for 10 talents of fine gold, I'll give you the wealth of Egypt. Give me my freedom, and I'll give you the scepter. Give me the water girl, Lilia, and I'll give you the princess of your heart's desire. Give me this house of Baca, and I'll give you the throne. Give me all that I ask,
Robinson was extraordinary, wonderful actor, and very good, too, in this part. Hard part to reach.
Eddie Robinson proved to be such a marvelous talent. Eddie, you know, was blacklisted. In Eddie's autobiography, he said, DeMille saved my career. I remember grandfather coming home very worried, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, I don't understand Eddie's portrayal of Dathan. I'm worried about it. I said, Grandfather, why don't you talk to him? He said, oh, I would never talk to anybody of Eddie's talent, leaving him alone. When he saw the completed Dathan, he saw a wicked humor that Eddie had brought to the part that Grandfather hadn't understood in the segments they had done. But as a whole, he was just elated.
We can offer you little, but we offer all we have.
Yvonne De Carlo was one of the loveliest, sweetest ladies I have ever met. She was the most regular person, always kind, always delightful, remembered everybody's name. When I came on the set, she remembered my name. I mean, anybody that beautiful that actually remembered my name.
I remember so much time that I spent on the Ten Commandments. I think that working with DeMille for me was probably the highlight of my career. Why he chose me over the 200, 300 other kids that he, had the chance to look at, I don't know. I think that the look was very important to him. When they put the skull cap on me in makeup and they looked at me, at one point they said that I looked more like Yul Brynner's son than his own children. And I think that must have had a huge amount to do with them casting me, was the fact that I looked the part.
Is it true that Egyptian girls paint their eyes?
Yes. Very few have eyes as beautiful as yours.
My mother had to take a neighbor girl to be seen for the Ten Commandments, and in those days they were seeing everybody in town. But they almost all had agents. I did not. And my mother went in, bold as brass, and found out that they needed a lot of girls with dark hair and dark eyes, especially girls who could dance. And so my mother pulled out a little wallet snapshot of me and said, do you think my daughter could audition? And oh, sure, he's seeing everybody. Why not your daughter? And that's how it happened. I had a separate appointment. There was no cattle call in those days. Mr. DeMille did everything impeccably. And Charlotte Clary saw me alone, sitting in her office, and she walked in the door and said, oh, we have a Lulua. It was just like that. But I did not have the part at that point. This was only the very, very beginning. And my first appointment with Charlotte Clary might have been in March, and this went on until I finally got the part in July. It was interesting the way I found out that I had the part, because it was from Mr. DeMille's own mouth. And he said to me, this is the most important movie I've ever made in a very long career of making important movies. This is a movie you will take your grandchildren to see. This is a movie that will live forever. And every single part matters very much to me. And your part matters very much to me, because you are a teenage flirt.
This robe is not Egyptian. Who cares? He's man.
And you're going to be the only teenager that the teenagers in the audience can identify with. So the part of Lulua matters much to me. I will give you the part if you will make an agreement with me. If you will allow me to yell at you, if I need to. I want to make it clear that this was not in any way a bullying or a belittling kind of experience. He knew that a 15-year-old with a small voice who had never acted before might not be able to handle everything.
You just had these larger-than-life people, Chuck Heston as Moses, and Yul Brynner as Ramses, and Ann Baxter, and gosh, I think that DeMille took advantage of their natural attributes and their natural abilities and really kind of enhanced the characters through the people. You couldn't help but appreciate the hugeness of it, so it certainly impressed me. I mean, every day that I went to work, I loved.
I'm so grateful, so blessed to have been a part of it. It changed my life.